Welcome! In this series of videos, we will cover the design and implementation of a project, from initial design through coding and development to testing, using the PowerBasic Windows compiler. Today we will look again at our DLL, containing an enhanced message box function, and add a URL link to the message box. This was our application at the end of the last video. We have created a DLL, and that DLL has inside it a function which will display a custom message box on the user's screen. The purpose of this is to allow more than the standard 3 buttons on a message box, and we can name each of the buttons quite independently. What we're going to do today is to enhance this message box further and give an optional parameter to our DLL function. This optional parameter will contain text and a URL, and if it is populated, it will place a URL inside the message box itself. This can be used to direct users towards a website. The purpose of this is to redirect your user to an external system. So let's have a look at the code. So there are a number of changes we'll need to make to our application. First of all, we will change the declaration inside our message box application to add this extra parameter. I'm going to make this parameter an optional parameter, because you may not always want a URL on the message box. Putting the word optional or OPT before the variable name will allow this parameter to be optional. This allows the declaration to work whether we actually use this parameter or not. So this is how we would call our new function. We will pass all the parameters we have already been passing, but we will pass an additional parameter which will be the URL to the website we wish to redirect our user to. So having made the changes in here, we now have to make the changes inside the DLL itself. So at the beginning of our code, we're going to add a new global. This will be the global for the rich text library. And in addition, we're going to add a constant for the rich edit control we're going to optionally add to the message box. So if we have a look at our PB message box function, we'll need to add our optional parameter on the end of the parameters list. For optional parameters, you can detect whether the parameter has been supplied by the user or not using the isMissing function. We will first set up a local variable called local URL. This will be the local copy of the URL the user has passed in for the function. We can then test the variable strURL, and if it is not missing, then we can populate the str local URL. So if the optional parameter is given, then our local URL variable will be populated. If the optional parameter is not given, then local URL will be an empty length string, which we can test later on in the code. So further down in the code, where we've added the image that the user wishes to have on the message box, we can determine whether the local URL is populated or not. If it is not populated, then we need do nothing. If it is populated, then we need to load up our rich text DLL. And having called the load library, which is a Windows API call to load the library into memory, we can then test to see whether the library handle has been populated or not. If it has not been populated, then we have not been successful in loading the library, in which case we will not display the URL on the message box. So we're now using a control add statement. This will add the rich text control to our dialog. We have already worked out how far down the dialog this is to appear using the long start Y variable. This currently marks the beginning of the buttons, but we'll put our rich text control between the text the user has supplied and the buttons to appear below them. Next, we will set the background color of the rich text control to be the standard grey. Since our user may have been passing both text and a URL in this parameter, we want to auto-detect the URL itself, so that only the URL section of the text is actually underlined and linkable. We can do this by a control send command, using an option to auto-detect the URL itself. This is a very useful option of the rich text control. as this rich text control will be a link the user can click on, we need to put some kind of event handling in place. And we're going to use another control send command to set that up. This set event mask with the parameter enmLink will allow us to pick up the link in a notify section of our callback function, our event handler. And the final task in this function is to set the actual text of the rich edit control. This we can do with a very simple control set text command, using the variable local URL. Now that we've positioned the rich text control on the dialog, we'll need to move our button start position slightly further down the dialog so it doesn't overwrite it. So now that that's in place, we can look to handling the event that will happen when the user actually clicks on the URL itself. For this, we'll need to go and have a look at the callback function, the event handler for our dialog. Since we're going to be using the notify, we're going to put a pointer in as one of our local variables here. This will allow us to process the notifications. And we're going to create a new event called wm_notify. To ensure that we get the notify from the correct object, we will then do a test to see where the notification has originated from. If it's from our rich edit control, then we can process further. We then have to determine what kind of event this actually is. We're looking for the enlink event. This is where the user has clicked on the rich edit control and we want to actually action that and display the URL to the user. This is our enlink event. To make life easier, we're going to use one of our library functions here. This is a function that handles clicks on hyperlinks, specifically for rich edit controls. So we will add this library to the beginning of our code. This is the PB Windows controls include file. Right, one more compile, and we have compiled quite cleanly. So let's test this now. Let's try running the message box as it was originally. This will ensure that the extra functionality we have put in has not broken existing code. So we run our application and we're getting the small message box appearing with the 3 buttons we have designated, and the third button is seen as the default. So our existing functionality is working quite happily. So let's try it with the optional parameter added, the URL. And there is our message box. We have the text as we had before, we have the 3 buttons, and we have the URL showing. So if we now click on the URL, we'll actually launch that website. Yes, our website does appear on the screen. The message box appears above our web page. This is because we set the dialog of our box to be topmost, which will mean it will appear above all other applications on the system. So we can then close that down and close our browser. So can we add a piece of text to the beginning of the URL string and have that appear as plain text on our dialog? So we have now added a piece of plain text before the URL itself. Click link below for more information. We've added a control line feed at the end of that and followed by the URL itself. So let's try running that code now. So indeed it does. The option to auto-detect a URL has actually worked. We have the text appearing above the URL, and the URL, should we click on it, will launch the web page. So what we've achieved today is we have added an optional parameter to the function within our DLL. This optional parameter allows us to embed a link in the message box we display to the user. We can have that with a piece of text or without. Hopefully you'll find this functionality useful in your applications. In our next video, we're going to take the logic within our function in the DLL and put it into a static linked library, an SLL. But that's it for today. Thank you for watching.